Today and Across the Fence, we're sizing up Vermont's urban forests and cataloging the trees growing right outside your front door. It's all part of the Care of the Urban Forestry Project. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. If you think of forest in Vermont, your mind probably goes to the trees that cover our hills and dot our valleys. What might not come to mind are the trees you see on your drive to work or outside your office window. It's the urban forest. It's diverse and requires as much attention as any woodland. And that's where the Care of the Urban Forest Project comes in. To find out more, I'm joined by UVM Extension's Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator, Elise Shadler. Thanks a lot for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
What is the Care of the Urban Forest Project?
Sure. So the project is a multi-year initiative that's funded by the USDA Forest Service that's allowing our program to work with 20 priority communities throughout the state over a couple-year period to help them kind of establish some really fundamental components of an urban forestry program.
Mm-hmm. Why is that important?
Well, you know, across our state, we only have 3 communities that have a city arborist on staff. So a lot of the care for trees that's happening in towns in Vermont is either happening by volunteer tree board or a conservation commission or the DPW crew or the roads crew and the road foreman. So what we really want to do is support communities in establishing those fundamental components of their tree program so they can better steward and manage their trees.
Well, because they're an expensive resource to have.
They're an expensive resource to have, but they're part of the infrastructure of the town. So, you know, they're providing benefits over time, pretty significant benefits for stormwater management, aesthetic value. They're providing shade. They're helping mitigate heating and cooling costs for buildings. So, you know, they're part of the infrastructure and they should be managed just like any other infrastructure piece.
Well, you mentioned that the project involves 20 of Vermont's urban communities, and we're going to take a moment now to visit with one of those communities. Across the Fence's Keith Silva caught up with Elise and other members of the Urban and Community Forest team in northeastern Vermont.
Our kind of catchphrase in the field of urban forestry is right tree, right place, right way.
Elise Shadler documents what trees are growing in the urban forests of Vermont's villages, cities, and towns. On the docket, St. Albans.
We're essentially looking at every tree that falls within the public right-of-way along streets and residential roads, and also trees on public parks, in cemeteries, around town office buildings, around libraries, and at some schools in some communities. So anything that's considered to be under the public purview. You know, they're small now and they're crossed, and as they grow larger, they're going to eventually...
Shadler works for the Vermont Urban Community Forestry Program, a collaboration between University of Vermont Extension and Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation. St. Albans is one of 20 communities Shadler and her colleagues are visiting. At each site, they've logged over 200 hours of data to create a tree inventory. Their efforts set the foundation for the Care of the Urban Forest Project.
It's 3 major components. The first is a public tree inventory. The second is a management plan for the trees based on the results of that inventory. And then the third step is that we're actually bringing in a certified arborist to work with the town staff in each community to learn how to better maintain their trees and manage their trees properly. In Vermont, most communities do not have a city arborist that's paid on staff, so a lot of times that falls on the volunteer tree warden or a conservation commission or a volunteer tree board, or it's housed, you know, in the public works department or parks and rec. So we really want to support communities that have a large street tree population in better managing and stewarding those trees, and the very first step is just to know what you have.
With a tape measure and an expert set of eyes, Shadler notes every aspect of each tree, from its species and size to its condition and location. All the information gets recorded on an iPad.
We really wanted something that was going to be web-based and accessible from multiple devices by multiple people. So we've been working with the State of Vermont's Agency of Natural Resources IT team for the last couple years on developing a really specific Vermont public tree inventory tool. The great thing about this system is that when we go home at the end of the day and sync that data from the day, it automatically uploads to the A&R Atlas tool, which is an online map-based tool that has multiple different layers that the Agency of Natural Resources manages. After we're finished taking this data, you can actually zoom into your town, click on the urban tree canopy layer, and find your street and click on the tree that's in front of your house, and you can see what species it is, what size it is, if there's anything that we flagged that tree for, and a picture of it.
If that were out in your field behind your house, maybe you could take your chances on
Curtis Comfort is the Planning and Permitting Administrator for St. Albans and the city's tree warden.
I'm anxious to see the results of the inventory and see what the crew thinks are the hot spots in the city, what trees really need attention right away so that we can maintain their dignity, their beauty, and their health.
The service being provided by this project is a valuable tool for shaping how the city will look in the future. It's sure to help Comfort in his work, but it's also an asset to the taxpayers of St. Albans.
Having an inventory of the trees and having a proactive plan for maintenance is of the utmost importance. And to naysayers who may say you should be more concerned with issues directly related to the city, like the construction of buildings, roads, sidewalks, having a healthy urban forest is directly related to that stuff, because if you have the wrong tree planted in the wrong place, you may spend thousands of dollars rebuilding a sidewalk, and it may only be a matter of years before the roots of a tree that become invasive to, who knows, sewer pipes underneath, or just start to buckle the sidewalk. There's a very pragmatic way to look at the urban forest as well.
If any part of that tree were to fail, it's gonna...
Like any natural resource, an urban forest has to be conserved and cared for to ensure its survival.
We want long-lived, large trees that are healthy, because those are going to provide the most long-term benefits to citizens and the community as a whole. So, we are advocates of, even if you have a spot where you might be able to plant a tree, if that's not going to have enough soil volume for that tree to succeed, we're not going to recommend you put a tree there. Again, I think that in the past, the field has been really focused on planting, and I think that we're really coming to a point now, and especially in Vermont communities, that a lot of them have a lot of trees, is let's care for the trees that are in the ground, let's prune them properly, let's train them properly, set them up to have a really long-lived and healthy life.
Cataloging, counting, and planning for the future of the urban forest. One community, one street, and one tree at a time. In St. Albans, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Well, thanks, Keith. As I mentioned, St. Albans is one of 20 communities involved in the care of the urban forestry project. Here in the studio, I'm joined with Elise Shadler of UVM Extension, and joining us now is Nick Meyer. Nick is from Essex Junction, where he serves on the community's Tree Advisory Committee. Now, Elise, Essex Junction was one of the first communities involved with the project. What towns have you worked with so far, and how are the communities selected?
Sure. So Essex Junction and Colchester were our pilot communities, and we worked with them both starting in 2013. Since then, we've worked with Shelburne, Swanton Village, Northfield, Johnson Village, Bristol, Vergennes, Middlebury, Heinsberg, Milton, St. Albans City, Lindenville, Brattleboro, Springfield, Rockingham, and Berry City.
Wow, so how have you gone about collecting the data, and what types of information are you taking on each tree?
Sure, so we work with each community individually to figure out what's going to work best. Some of the towns have really active volunteers or volunteer groups that really want to be engaged in the actual data collection. So, for example, in Heinsberg, we worked with local volunteers, and same in Johnson. And as far as, and then we've worked with students from the Lands internship program, which is based out of UVM. And then this year, we're actually working with the district forest offices through Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. So our state lands foresters are actually out in the field taking the data, which is cool for them to get into the communities a little bit. As far as the data collected, again, we work with communities to figure out what's most useful for them and what they're actually going to be able to use in management. So our baseline data includes species and size and location of the tree, but beyond that, there are all these forest or tree health indicators and kind of tree management characteristics and components that we'll work with the community to figure out what they want update on.
So Nick, Essex Junction was the first community to engage in the project 3 years ago. Why was it important for the Tree Advisory Committee to partner with the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program in this effort, and how did you get involved?
Well, at that time, we didn't have an advisory committee. We were a group of 5 or 6 residents who just had a real interest in trees, recognizing the beautification value of it, as well as the positive environmental effects. And it seemed like a logical place to approach the Urban Community Forestry Program, because they were just a vast resource of information and have the expertise. And we were looking to formalize our group into an advisory committee.
And so how has that committee been able to use the information from the tree inventory?
Oh, in so many ways. You know, when we were trying to establish a committee to approach the trustees, we really needed to know what we had in our community. And by doing that, we've learned of the number of trees. We have over 600 trees in the village, I should say, and what the species makeup is. We also learned of the health of some of them. So it really established a framework that we can develop a management plan and show the importance and how we can protect this valuable resource.
Now, Vermont is about 75% forested. Why do you think that it's important for communities to invest time and money in urban trees?
Quality of life, as much as anything. I think that walk out the door on a hot day, take a walk down the street, where do you want to be? You want to be under a tree. Essex Junction is a walkable community, but we have traffic corridors, a lot of traffic coming through. The trees can calm traffic. They act as buffers. They beautify, they soften the landscape, just for so many reasons.
And so, Elise, now in addition to the tree inventory, this project includes support for planning and tree care training for town staff. Tell us a little bit more about these components and what you hope communities will do after the project's over.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it's a 3-part project, so the inventory, and that kind of gives us a baseline, as Nick mentioned, to know what you have, so you know what you need to be managing and know how to move the program forward. So after the inventory is done, we produce a report with recommendations, and the planning process is really about, you know, turning some of those recommendations into actionable goals. So some communities like Essex Junction have decided to do that in-house. For the others, we're contracting with the local regional planning commissions to bring a planner in to actually facilitate the development of those plans. And then the technical tree care training piece, that's really about increasing capacity in-house so town staff can actually manage the trees and know a little bit more about how to assess a tree for health and for risk. And we started last week, actually kicked off the first round of those trainings, and they're happening right now. So, you know, we really hope that, I think Essex Junction is a great story of how we hope that this project can really kind of kickstart a vibrant tree program and allow these towns to better steward and manage their trees.
Nick, is there any advice or anything that you want to say to your fellow Vermonters who are interested maybe in starting a tree committee of their own?
I think you've got to seek out others who have the passion that you have and create alliances, and it's going to take some education because, as you said, Vermont is 75% forested, and we kind of take trees for granted, but their value in the urban landscape is great.
And so, Elise, what other services does the Urban and Community Forestry Program offer? And if someone wants to get engaged in caring for their community's trees, what should they do?
Yeah, so we offer educational programming like our Stewards of the Urban Landscape training and Forest Pest First Detector Citizen. That's another training program that we offer. We also have a webinar series and an annual conference. We do technical assistance, so I can come in and help a town work on a tree policy or help a town work on a plan. And we also have a grants program, so we offer financial assistance, and that runs every year in the spring. Our website is a great place to start for any interest in the program. It's www.vtcommunityforestry.org.
And one thing we haven't talked about, other than just the beauty of the trees, is financially what it means to a community to maintain healthy trees, because the last thing you want to do is start replacing trees.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely something that towns are aware of, and we, again, consider trees part of the infrastructure of the community. So, They do require some investment, but the return on that investment is great, and the benefits they provide long term are certainly worth the effort of putting them in the ground.
And what would you say about Essex Junction? Do you think there's growing momentum to recognize the trees and take care of them?
Absolutely. No, we've really come a long ways in the 4 years, and I think that they'll become part of the infrastructure where they've often been dealt with as sometimes a hazard. And they can be a hazard, but
Properly managed.
properly managed.
And
right.
proactively managed,
Yes.
not just reactively managed.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks,
That's our
Judy.
program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.